You've no doubt heard of Watling Street, the Roman road which ran from London to the north. You may also have heard of the pre-Roman road called the Ickneild Way. The place at which these two roads intersected was called Duro go Brevis. It is now called Dunstable. Now, today the area inside that red circle looks like this. We've still got the Ickneild Way, or West Street and Church Street, going across, and here we've still got Watling Street, or Dunstable High Street, or if you prefer the A5 here. But let's go back for a few moments to those good old medieval days when kings were kings and peasants knew their place. But first let's turn the map round a bit so that we've got east at the top. Round about the year 1111, Henry I built himself a house here. The house has disappeared, but that little area still has the name Kingsbury. Henry I must have quite liked this place, because about 20 years later, in 1131, he instigated and endowed the founding of a priory just across the road from his house. A little of the priory grounds survives and serves as a public park. The church seems to have taken quite a long time to build, about 80 years I think, but eventually a fully formed monastery was in place, as you can see on the plan. Whilst we're looking at this west end, just compare it to the original building as seen in this drawing. One of the towers and part of the facade seem to have disappeared. We'll see why later. As we look along the south side of the building, we can see some white lines marked on the grass. At first, I thought these must be for a new game played here in the park, but actually they are very helpful lines marking the location of the foundations of the old monastery buildings. We've come round now to the north side, where we can see the tower better, and just across the road to our right is where Henry's palace was. Now back to the west end, which is where the entrance is. But before we go inside, let's just turn to our right and look at the gateway, which is from the original gatehouse, the entry to the priory. Now it's about time we had a look inside the church. Up to the end of the 14th century, the local unwashed had been allowed to worship in the north aisle. As the population grew, they were eventually allowed to use the nave, on condition that they paid for its upkeep. What we see here is the old nave with the far east end divided off by the screen to form a chancel. The wall at the east end originally had doors through which the monks would go into a further part of the church. So we're now in the south aisle, that one originally used by the townspeople for their worship. Here we can find many memorials, including one to the South African Wars in Victorian times. There are some nice windows here, including some modern ones by John Hayward, who we met at St. Michael Paternoster Royal in the City of London. In 1290, the funeral cortege of Queen Eleanor, wife of Edward I, was housed overnight at the Priory. An Eleanor Cross was erected near the crossroads to mark this, but this also has disappeared, deliberately destroyed, I am told, during the Civil War by Fairfax. We're now going to have a look at the window in the west end, which shows King Henry I and Bernard, the founders of the Priory. In 1533, the annulment of the marriage of Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon by Bishop Thomas Cranmer took place in this church. As you leave the church, you can see the old west doors, which are full of bullet holes. During the Civil War, Royalist troops from Leighton Buzzard attacked the church while the congregation was inside at worship. So just for the record, let's have a look across the road. We have a pub and a hotel, and an implication that some part of both came from the old palace. Back at the crossroads, we at least have a plaque which records the Eleanor Cross. The traffic going across is on the Ickneild way, and these cars here are off up Watling Street, and Dunstable Priory is behind that segment there.